The geometry of my life had become a series of small, predictable triangles. My small, tidy house in a Denver neighborhood that had quietly gentrified around me formed one point. My son Mark's larger, perpetually messy suburban home was the second. The twins' preschool, the grocery store, and the pediatrician's office formed the shifting points in between. These were the coordinates of my existence, plotted on a map that was no longer my own. At 67, I was a widow, a mother, a grandmother. The order of those titles felt significant. The first widow was, a fact, a stone I carried in my pocket. Its weight so familiar I often forgot it was there until I reached in for something else. The second mother had been the defining shape of my adult life. The third grandmother was supposed to be the reward, the sweet, uncomplicated dessert after the main course of raising a child. Instead, it had become a second, more demanding full-time job. One I had never officially applied for, but had been seamlessly absorbed into. That Tuesday was a perfect specimen of my new normal. The alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m. Not for me, but to ensure I was dressed, caffeinated, and on the road by 6:30 to reach Mark's house by 7 o'clock. In time for Chloe to hand off the twin tornadoes, Lily and Liam, age 4 before she dashed to her marketing job. "You're a lifesaver, Linda," Chloe would say. Her words a hurried mantra as she shoved a travel mug of coffee into her bag and shrugged on her blazer. She always looked polished, a sharp contrast to my comfortable. "Forgiving jeans and sneakers, it's no trouble," I'd always reply. The automatic response of a well-programmed machine. The day was a marathon of small tasks. Making breakfast while simultaneously locating a specific, irreplaceable blue dinosaur toy. Wiping sticky jam from fingers and the table. The preschool run, a chorus of "Why, Grandma?" from the back seat. The few hours of silence in their house were spent not on my own pursuits, but on their laundry, loading the dishwasher, and fielding texts from Chloe. "Can you check if Liam's sneakers are in the laundry room? The plumber is coming between 1 and 3. Is that okay?" I didn't mind the work. What I minded was the slow, imperceptible erosion of myself. My book club had gently unsubscribed me after a year of absences. My walks in the botanic gardens had been replaced with trips to the playground. My own home had become a place I mostly slept. That afternoon, after the preschool pickup, I stopped at the grocery store. The list was in Chloe's handwriting on my phone. As I moved through the brightly lit aisles, I felt a familiar pang. This was Robert's favorite Sunday activity. He'd debate the merits of different cuts of meat, smell the melons, and always sneak a box of expensive chocolates into the cart when he thought I wasn't looking. "For my best girl," he'd whisper later. His breath warm against my ear. The memory was so vivid, it stole my breath for a moment. I leaned on the cart, the fluorescent lights suddenly too harsh. I was so tired. It was a deep, cellular exhaustion that a full night's sleep never touched. I arrived at their house, my arms laden with bags. The key they'd given me felt cold in my hand. It was a symbol of trust, of family. But lately, it had begun to feel like the key to my own cage. I turned it silently, not wanting to wake the twins if they'd nodded off in the car, and were being carried inside, and that's when I heard him. Mark, my boy. His voice, confident and slightly amused, floated from the kitchen. "Dude, relax. It's not a problem. Mom will babysit forever." I froze, 1 foot over the threshold. The plastic bag handles cut deeper into my palms. He laughed then, a light, easy sound. "Seriously, she has nothing else to do." Click. The world didn't slow down. It didn't speed up. It simply reconfigured itself around those 7 words. She has nothing else to do. They weren't shouted in anger. They weren't hissed in malice. They were spoken with casual, utter certainty, as if stating a fundamental law of physics. Gravity exists. The sky is blue. Mom has nothing else to do. The weight of the groceries, of the 4 years of the lonely nights in my silent house, of the forgotten book club, of the walks I never took, of the ghost of my husband in an empty bed, it all collapsed onto me at once. I wasn't a person. I was a function, a convenience, a utility like running water or electricity expected to be always on, always available. Slowly, carefully, I stepped back. I placed the bags of groceries on the porch, right on the welcome mat I'd bought them. I closed the door without a sound, the latch clicking into place with a finality that echoed in my soul. I drove home in a silence so profound I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My hands were steady on the wheel. My eyes were dry. I felt empty, hollowed out, dotted home. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the familiar shadows of my living room, past the photos of Robert and me in Paris, in Mexico, of a younger, brighter version of myself who believed in someday. I went straight to my bedroom and opened the closet. There, behind the box of sweaters, was the journal. The leather was soft, worn from our hands, tracing its cover. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Robert had died in, and I opened it. His sketch of the Colosseum greeted me, all bold, confident lines. My neat script below it: best to go in the shoulder season. Avoid Tuesdays. We were so young, so full of a future we thought was guaranteed. I turned the pages, the Venetian canals, the rolling hills of Tuscany, and then the Amalfi Coast. Robert had tried to capture the vibrant, almost unreal blue of the water, the cascade of colorful houses down the cliffs. He'd written in the margin for Linda, to watch the sunset with a glass of local wine, to feel the sun on our faces and know we made it. A single hot tear finally escaped, tracing a path through the dust on the cover. It wasn't a tear of sadness for the past, but of white-hot fury for the present. Fury at Mark, fury at Chloe, but most of all, fury at myself. Robert's voice. Not the frail one from the hospice, but his strong, vibrant voice seemed to fill the room. You have to go, Lynn. You have to see it for both of us. He hadn't just meant the trip. He had meant life. He had meant for me to live. I looked from the journal's dreamscape to my dark, silent room, from the vibrant blue of the Mediterranean to the beige walls of my captivity. She has nothing else to do. The words were no longer a verdict. They were a challenge. I stood up, the journal clutched to my chest. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and the screen glowed to life, illuminating my determined face in the darkness. I didn't type flights to Italy. I didn't type 2-week vacation. My fingers, steady and sure, typed the words that would become the new coordinates of my life. One-way ticket to Rome. Asterisk, the confirmation email landed in my inbox with a soft, decisive ping. It felt louder than any door slam. Booking confirmed. Den to FCO. Below it, the staggering price of a last minute. One-way business class, CETA, reckless extravagance I would have never considered a day ago. I looked at the number, and instead of panic, I felt a grim sense of justice. This was the cost of 4 years of unpaid labor. This was the cost of my invisibility. The next 72 hours were an exercise in surreal duality. I moved through my babysitting duties as Linda thought automaton. All the while, inside, a new secret Linda was being constructed, piece by piece. The next morning, at the playground, I pushed Lily on the swing. Higher, Grandma, higher. I pushed my mind 1,000 miles away. I need to call Sarah and cancel lunch next month. I'll tell her I'm sick. I wiped Liam's nose after a tumble on the mulch. It's okay, sweetheart. All better. I need to buy a converter for my laptop. And a new suitcase. The big one. I sat at their kitchen table, eating a crustless peanut butter sandwich the twins had abandoned. You're so good with them, Linda Chloe said, rushing through. I don't know what we'd do without you. I gave her a small, tight smile. You're about to find out. Packing was a strange archaeological dig through my own life. What did Linda wear? I stared into a closet full of comfortable, stretchy, easy-to-clean fabrics. None of it felt like me. Who was me? I found a linen dress, tucked in the back, from a cruise Robert and I had taken a decade ago. It was elegant, impractical. I packed it. I packed the journal. I packed a single photograph of Robert and me tucked into the zippered compartment. I did not pack my apron. The fear came in waves, cold and nauseating. What was I doing? I was a grandmother. I lived in Denver. People like me didn't run off to Italy on a one-way ticket. This was the behavior of a rebellious teenager, not a 67-year-old woman. I'd have a heart attack in a foreign airport. I'd be robbed. I'd be lonely. I'd fail. But then I'd remember the sound of Mark's voice. She has nothing else to do. And the fear would be burned away by a fresh surge of righteous anger. This wasn't a whim. It was a reclamation. The night before my flight, I wrote the note. I drafted a dozen versions. Long, emotional letters explaining my every feeling, justifying my decision. They all sounded like pleas for understanding. I didn't need their understanding. I needed my freedom. Asterisk, the final version was 3 sentences. Written in my clearest handwriting on a plain sheet of paper. Mark, I love you and the twins more than anything. But I realized I have been living a half-life. I have gone to Italy to finish the dream your father and I started. I will be in touch when I can. Mom, I left it in a plain white envelope on my clean, empty kitchen table. Next to it, I placed the house key. The act felt more significant than any wedding vow. I was handing back the key to my cage. My taxi arrived at 4 a.m. The sky was still a deep, star-flecked navy. As the car pulled away from my curb, I didn't look back at my house. I looked forward through the windshield at the road leading to the highway, to the airport, to the rest of my life. The Denver International Airport was a monument to goodbyes and hellos. I moved through security, a solitary, silver-haired figure amidst families and couples. I felt 100 eyes on me, judging my solitude. But for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt self-contained, potent, when I boarded the plane and settled into the business. Class Seaton, another first-flight attendant, offered me a glass of champagne. I accepted. As the plane taxied and then roared into the sky, pressing me back into the seat, I looked out the window. The lights of Denver shrank into a distant, glittering grid, the map of my old life. Growing smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the clouds. I took a sip of champagne. It was dry and crisp. I opened the journal on my tray table to Robert's sketch of Rome. We're going. Robert, I whispered to the window, to the clouds, to the memory of the man I loved. We're finally going. Asterisk, the chaos of Rome's Fiumicino Airport was a sensory assault after the sterile quiet of the plane. A cacophony of rapid-fire Italian, the crush of bodies, the frantic search for baggage, claim it, was overwhelming. The familiar tendrils of panic began to curl in my stomach. What have I done? I want to go home. But the thought of home brought back the image of the grocery bags on the porch, the key on the table. There was no home to go back to. Not that one. This chaos was now my path. I managed to get my suitcase, change some money, and find the line for a taxi. My high school Italian, diligently practiced from a language tape for this very trip decades ago, had fossilized in my brain. Dove. Va. The taxi driver asked. "Che?" A burly man with a kind face. I fumbled for the address of the small pensione I'd booked near the Trastevere neighborhood. "Ah, Trastevere. Bella," he said, and launched into a cheerful monologue I couldn't hope to understand. I just nodded and looked out the window, and then I saw it. Not a ruin, not a postcard, but the city itself. The sun was a brilliant golden orb, so different from the sharp Colorado light. It warmed the ancient ochre-colored buildings, glinted off the windows of buzzing Vespas, and dappled through the leaves of tall, elegant pine trees. The air coming through the cab window was warm and smelled of diesel. Coffee and something else, the scent of sun-baked stone and centuries. My heart, which had been clenched like a fist, began to relax. This was not Denver. This was new. The pensione was on a narrow cobblestone street. Laundry strung between buildings overhead like festive flags. My room was small, simple, with a shuttered window that opened onto a tiny courtyard where a fountain trickled. It was perfect. I was exhausted, but the 6-hour time difference was a strange, buzzing energy in my veins. It was only midday here. Back in Denver, they would just be waking up. Soon they would discover I was gone. The thought was a cold stone in my stomach. I pushed it away. I had to stay here in this moment. I had to choose myself minute by minute. I left the pensione and simply started walking. I got lost immediately. The streets of Trastevere were a labyrinth, but unlike the structured grid of Denver, this was a labyrinth designed for discovery. Around one corner, a bustling piazza with a magnificent fountain. Around another, a tiny trattoria with tables spilling onto the street. The air rich with the smell of garlic and roasting meat. My stomach growled. I was hungry. Truly, simply hungry. Not because it was mealtime on a schedule, but because my body demanded it. I found a small bakery and pointed at a flaky golden pastry. Una sfogliatella, per favor, I managed. The woman behind the counter smiled and handed it to me. I bit into it, sitting on the steps of a fountain. It was still warm, the ricotta cheese feeling creamy and lightly citrusy. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. It tasted of freedom. I spent the afternoon wandering. I didn't go to the Colosseum. I didn't go to the Vatican. I just walked. I watched old men arguing over a chess game. I saw a young couple kissing, oblivious to the world. I listened to the music of a language I didn't understand and found it beautiful nonetheless, as the sun began to set, painting the Roman sky in shades of orange and pink. I found a small enoteca, a wine bar, tucked down an alley. I gathered my courage and walked in. I ordered a glass of local white wine by pointing at the menu. I took it to a small table in the corner, and there, sipping the crisp, cold wine, surrounded by the animated chatter of Romans, the weight of the last 4 years began to truly, finally lift. The guilt was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed by a feeling so long forgotten, it took me a moment to name it. It was joy. Simple, uncomplicated joy. I took out my phone. It was buzzing incessantly, a frantic, angry pulse from another world. Dozens of missed calls, text messages lighting up the screen. Mom, where are you? Linda, this isn't funny. The kids are upset. We're calling the police. I looked at the screen, then at my glass of wine, then at the vibrant life unfolding around me on a Roman evening. I knew what I had to do. I didn't type a response. I opened the camera. I turned it towards myself, capturing the warm stone of the building behind me, my glass of wine on the table, and the peaceful, resolute expression on my face. I was not the harried, invisible grandmother from Denver. I was Linda in Rome. I sent the picture. I typed 3 words, not of explanation, but of declaration. I am well. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I pressed the button on the side of the phone and held it until the screen went dark. I powered it off. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was the silence of my own choosing. I finished my wine, paid my bill, and walked back out into the Roman night. The adventure, my adventure, had truly begun. Asterisk, the silence in Linda's house was a physical presence. Mark stood in her pristine kitchen, the white envelope stark against the polished wood of the table. The note, with its 3 devastating sentences, felt like a legal document severing a fundamental tie. I had been living a half-life. The words echoed in the hollow space she had left behind. Where is she? Chloe's voice was sharp with panic over the phone. The school just called. The twins are in the office. No one picked them up. She's gone, Mark said, his voice flat. He read the note aloud, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Gone? To Italy? Chloe's disbelief crackled through the speaker. Mark, that's insane. She's 67. She doesn't speak Italian. What about the twins' recital on Saturday? What about our conference next week? The practicalities hit him like a series of body blows. The intricate architecture of their life, built on the foundation of his mother's silent, reliable presence, was collapsing. The recital, the conference, the daycare drop-offs. The grocery shopping, it was a Jenga tower, and Linda had been the central supporting block. Now it was all teetering. He drove to the school in a daze, the twins' confused and tearful faces in the back seat, a fresh wave of guilt. Where's Grandma? Lily asked, her lower lip trembling. Grandma went on a trip, Mark said, the explanation feeling woefully inadequate. That evening, their home was a war zone of domestic chaos. Liam spilled juice on the rug. Lily refused to eat the hastily ordered pizza, and both were overtired and fractious. Chloe tried to work on her laptop at the kitchen table, her face pale with stress. I have a presentation deck that was due yesterday, Mark. I can't do this right now. Just give me a minute, he snapped, mopping up juice with a paper towel that disintegrated into pink pulp. This was the reality his mother had managed with seamless grace. It had looked easy. It was not. Later, after the twins were finally fitfully asleep, Mark scrolled through his phone, his anger a hot, tight coil in his chest. He found the photo. His mother in a Roman cafe, a glass of wine in front of her, a smile on her face he hadn't seen in years. She looked ... peaceful. She looked alive. I am well. The 3 words were a declaration of war. How dare she be well? How dare she be peaceful while their world was falling apart? We have to call the police, Chloe insisted, her arms crossed. Or the embassy. This isn't like her. She's not in her right mind, isn't she? Mark asked quietly, staring at the photo. The casual cruelty of his own words, now remembered in his mother's voice, echoed in his mind. She has nothing else to do. He had reduced her rich, complex, grief-strewn life to a void. And she had filled it with Italy. For the first time, a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced his anger. What if she was, in fact, perfectly in her right mind? Asterisk, meanwhile, Linda was learning a new vocabulary. The words were not just Italian, but sensory. Chiaroscuro, the interplay of light and shadow on ancient stone. Passeggiata, the leisurely evening stroll through the piazzas. Dolce far niente, sweetness of doing nothing. Her first full day in Rome. She deliberately avoided the guidebook highlights. She owed no one an itinerary. She found a small cafe near her pensione and practiced her first real interaction. Per favor, she said to the barista. He nodded and a moment later placed a tiny, powerful espresso and a small glass of water before her. She took it to a small table, watching the Romans come and go, downing their coffee in 2 quick gulps while standing at the bar. It was a ritual, a shot of caffeine and community to start the day. She walked until her feet ached, discovering hidden courtyards and vibrant markets. She bought a peach from a stall, its fragrance intoxicating, and ate it as she walked, the juice running down her chin. It was messy. It was undignified. It was glorious. In the afternoon, she found herself in the Piazza Navona, surrounded by the grandeur of Bernini's fountains. She sat on the stone steps, sketchbook and her lap, a new one she'd bought that morning. Tentatively, she began to draw the Fountain of the 4 Rivers. Her lines were shaky, nothing like Robert's confident strokes, but it didn't matter. She was seeing, truly seeing, for the first time in years. An elderly Italian gentleman sitting nearby watched her for a while. "La Pise?" he asked. Linda looked up, startled. "Solo un po'. Non sono brava." "Just a little. I'm not good," he smiled. "Il vedere che canta non il disignore." It is the seeing that counts, not the drawing. The simple kindness of the exchange filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the Roman sun. She was not invisible here. She was a woman with a sketchbook, a traveler, someone worthy of a polite, philosophical observation. That night, she dared to have dinner at a proper trattoria. She ordered cassio e pepe by pointing at a neighboring table. When the simple, glorious dish of pasta, cheese, and pepper arrived, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. She was dining alone in a foreign country. And she felt not a shred of loneliness, only a profound sense of accomplishment. Back in her room, she opened the journal. Next to Robert's sketch of the Trevi Fountain, she wrote, "I saw it today. I threw in 1 coin to ensure my return to Rome. Robert, I think you would have liked the light here. It makes everything look like a painting. I miss you. But for the first time, the missing doesn't feel like a hole I might fall into. It feels like a companion on the journey." Lynn, she fell asleep to the sound of the courtyard fountain, the faint sounds of laughter from the street below, and the quiet, steady hum of a life she was finally claiming as her own. Asterisk a week into the great Linda crisis, as Chloe had started to call it. The cracks in their Denver life were no longer superficial. They were structural. Mark had to take a half day off work to take Liam to the doctor for an ear infection. His boss, while sympathetic, had pointedly mentioned an upcoming deadline. Chloe, forced to leave work early for preschool pickup, missed a crucial client call. Their savings were taking a hit from the emergency babysitter they'd hired for 3 afternoons. A Wicca cheerful college student who cost 3 times what they paid Linda, which was nothing. The tension between them was a constant low-grade hum. It erupted one night over a burnt dinner. "I told you to set the timer," Mark said, scraping charred remains of fish into the trash. "I was on a conference call because I had to leave early, remember?" Chloe shot back. "Maybe if you'd taken the trash out this morning like you said you would. The kitchen wouldn't smell and I could think straight. Maybe if we hadn't built our entire lives on the assumption that my retired mother was our permanent, unpaid domestic staff, we wouldn't be in this mess." Mark yelled, the words exploding out of him before he could stop them. The kitchen went silent. Chloe stared at him, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. "Is that what you think?" she whispered. "I never forced her, Mark," she offered. "She wanted to be here." "Did she?" Mark asked, his voice dropping. "Or did we just never give her a choice? Did we ever once ask her what she wanted to do?" He walked out of the kitchen, leaving Chloe alone with the truth of his words. He went into the twins' room, watching them sleep, their faces peaceful and innocent. He thought of his mother's face in that photo from Rome. She had looked like that when he was a boy, vibrant, full of secret smiles. When had that light gone out? And how had he failed to notice? He went to his home office and opened his laptop. He didn't search for flights to Italy. He searched for his father's name. Robert S. He found the digital scans of the old photo albums his mother had painstakingly created. There they were, his parents, young and in love, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, hiking in the Rockies, their arms around each other, their faces turned towards the sun, towards the future. He had forgotten that woman. He had reduced the vibrant, adventurous woman in these photos to grandma, a functionary in his own busy life. The shame was a cold, heavy cloak. He had become the kind of man his father, a man who had adored his wife, but had despised. Linda's journey continued south to the Amalfi Coast. The bus ride from Sorrento to Positano was a white-knuckle experience of hairpin turns and sheer drops to the glittering sea below. But the view that unfolded as they entered Positano stole all the breath from her body. It was Robert's sketch come to life, but infinitely more magnificent. The pastel-colored houses cascaded down the cliff like a waterfall of sugar cubes into the impossible blue of the Tyrrhenian Sea. She found a small, family-run hotel with a terrace overlooking the sea. That evening, she dressed in her linen dress and went down to the terrace for aperitivo. She ordered an Aperol Spritz, the vibrant orange drink matching the spectacular sunset. She was joined by 2 other women traveling alone, Eleanor, a sharp-witted literature professor from London, and Maria, a warm-hearted widow from Barcelona. They were her age, maybe a little younger, and they welcomed her into their circle with easy grace. "So, Linda from Denver, what brings you to Italy alone?" Eleanor asked, sipping her Prosecco. The story tumbled out of Linda, more fully than she had ever told it to anyone, even herself. The years of babysitting, the loneliness after Robert, the overheard conversation, the crushing feeling of invisibility. "And I just left," she finished, her voice barely a whisper. Maria reached over and patted her hand. "Brava," she said. "You did not leave. You arrived at your own life." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "They see us as furniture because we are reliable, because we don't squeak. Sometimes you have to throw yourself out the window to remind them you are a person, not a sofa." Linda laughed, a real full-bodied laugh that felt wonderful. They talked for hours about love, loss, books, and the liberating power of traveling alone. They made plans to take a boat trip to Capri together the next day, lying in bed that night, listening to the gentle lap of the waves below. Linda felt a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. She was part of a tribe she never knew existed. Women of a certain age, claiming their space in the world, refusing to be invisible. She was not just Robert's widow or Mark's mother. She was Linda, a woman who had friends in Positano. The crisis point in Denver came 2 weeks after Linda's departure. Both twins came down with a violent stomach flu. It was a night of relentless cleaning, comforting, and exhaustion. At 3 a.m., as Mark was changing sweat-soaked sheets for the second time, while Chloe rocked a crying Lily in the bathroom, he hit a wall. He sat on the floor of the hallway, surrounded by soiled laundry, his head in his hands. He was crying deep, ragged sobs of utter defeat. Chloe found him there. Instead of anger, she felt a surge of compassion. She sat down beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We can't do this," he choked out. "We just can't." "I know," she whispered. "It's not just this," he said, gesturing to the mess. "It's what we did to Mom," I said. "I said she had nothing else to do." Chloe was silent for a long moment. "And I let you," she said finally. "I never stopped to think. I was just so grateful for the help. I used her, Mark. We both did." The admission hung in the air, a painful but necessary truth. "When she comes back," Chloe said, her voice firming with resolve, "things will be different. We'll hire proper help. We'll manage our own schedules. She will be their grandmother, not our employee." Mark nodded, wiping his eyes. "If she comes back..." The next morning, after a few hours of fitful sleep, Mark went to his mother's house. He needed to feel close to her. He went to her bookshelf and found the travel journal. He sat in her favorite armchair and opened it, seeing his father's sketches. His mother's notes, the sheer depth of the dream they had shared that was a physical blow. This wasn't a whim. This was a pilgrimage. He turned to the last page his mother had written on. The note she'd left for him in Rome. He read her words about the light, about missing his father, about her companion on the journey, and he broke down again. But this time it was not from self-pity. It was from a profound understanding of what he had almost cost her. He took out his phone. He didn't text. He opened his email and began to type. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask her to come home, "Mom. I found your journal. I'm sitting in your house and I finally understand. I am so sorry." Those words I said. They were the most ignorant, cruel words I have ever spoken. "You have given me everything my entire life. And I repaid you by making you feel small. I don't know where you are, but I hope you are seeing that light. I hope you are throwing coins in fountains and eating peaches and drawing terrible sketches. You deserve every second of it. We miss you. The twins miss you. But we will be okay. We are learning. We are so sorry. Take all the time you need. Live your dream for you and for Dad. I love you, Mark." He hit send before he could lose his nerve. It wasn't a request for forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. It was the first step in seeing his mother not as a function, but as a person. A person named Linda, who was currently, he hoped, sitting by the sea. The Amalfi Coast was not a place for hiding. The sun was too brilliant, the sea too vast, the colors too vibrant. It demanded that you be present. For Linda, this was both a terror and a salvation. After Mark's email arrived, she had spent a full day in a state of suspended animation. She read it on the terrace, the words blurring as tears welled in her eyes. His apology was a balm on a wound she had thought might never heal. But it also pulled at her a gentle tug on the leash she had just broken. The part of her that was still Mom wanted to reply immediately. To absolve him. To tell him it was all okay. But it wasn't all okay. And the new Linda, the one who drank Aperol Spritz at sunset with Eleanor and Maria, knew that a quick forgiveness would be a betrayal of her own journey. So she did nothing. She let the silence sit. It was the most difficult and the most powerful thing she had done yet. Instead of replying, "Shh, She went down to the Spiaggia, the small pebbled beach below the town. She rented a lounge chair and an umbrella, and for the first time in her adult life, she did absolutely nothing. She watched the light dance on the water. She listened to the melodic rise and fall of Italian conversations around her. She felt the sun warm her skin, a sensation so purely physical and selfish it felt like a sin. She dozed off, lulled by the rhythm of the waves, and woke up disoriented, her book splayed on her chest. It was glorious. That evening, over dinner with her new friends, she told them about the email, "And you have not replied." Maria asked, her eyes wide with admiration. "Dios mio. You are a brave woman, or a foolish one," Linda said, pushing her linguine alle vongole around her plate. "What if he thinks I'm still angry? What if he thinks I don't forgive him?" Eleanor took a sip of her wine. "My dear, what you think is what matters now. For decades, you have prioritized what they think. This is your time. The silence is your answer for now. It says, I am considering my own heart. That is a message they need to receive." The next day, the three women took the boat to Capri. As the boat skipped across the waves, the wind whipping through Linda's silver hair, she felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. They visited the Blue Grotto, the otherworldly blue light illuminating the dark cave, and hiked the paths above the Faraglione rocks, the Mediterranean stretching to infinity below. Standing there, high above the sea, with two women who had known her for only days but saw her so clearly, Linda felt a piece of her old self, the cautious, caring one, gently detach and float away on the sea breeze. She took a photo of the view and, on an impulse, sent it to Mark. No words, just the endless blue dot. It was her way of saying, I am here. I am living. And I am not done yet. Asterisk in Denver, Mark's email had opened a floodgate of change. The silence from his mother was agonizing, but he understood it. It was a necessary part of the punishment, and he accepted it. He and Chloe sat down with a calendar and their finances. It was a sobering meeting. "We need to stop the bleeding," Chloe said, her business acumen finally directed at their own lives. "We either need to cut back on our hours or find a more sustainable childcare solution." "Cutting back isn't an option right now," Mark said, pointing to their mortgage statement and the looming cost of the twins' future education. "So we find the solution." They interviewed 3 professional nanny agencies, flinching at the annual salaries. It was more than a second mortgage. But as they calculated the hours, the reliability, the sick day coverage, they began to see it not as an expense, but as an investment in their marriage, their sanity, and most importantly, in their relationship with their children. They hired a woman named Sophia, a warm but no-nonsense grandmother in her 60s who had raised 5 children of her own. She had clear boundaries, 45 hours a week, no weekends, and 2 weeks of paid vacation. It was a contract, a professional arrangement. It was nothing like the open-ended, guilt-fueled arrangement they had with Linda. The first day Sophia took over, the house felt different, calmer, more organized. She taught the twins a simple Spanish song and had them eating vegetables without complaint. Mark and Chloe came home to a clean house and happy children. It was a miracle they had been too blind to pay for before. One evening, about a week after Sophia started, Mark was building a Lego castle with Liam. It was something he used to pawn off on his mother, claiming he was too tired from work. "Daddy, look," Liam said, proudly holding up a lopsided tower. "I did it." Mark felt a lump in his throat. He had been missing this. In his drive to provide a certain life for his family, he had outsourced the very moments that made that life worth living. Later, he showed Chloe the photo Linda had sent from Capri. The sheer, breathtaking beauty of it stunned them both. "She's really doing it," Chloe said softly, a trace of awe in her voice. "She's not just on a vacation. She's on a mission." Mark nodded. "We have our scaffolding now, Sophia, the new schedule. It's shaky, but it's holding. We have to let her have this." The unspoken words hung between them. "We have to prove we can stand without her." Asterisk from the Amalfi Coast. Linda took a train to Florence. The journey was a visual feast, rolling through the heart of Tuscany. Past cypress trees standing, sentinel on sun-drenched hills and fields of sunflowers turning their faces to the sky. Florence was different from Rome, where Rome was grand, theatrical. Florence was an intimate masterpiece. The art was not just in the museums. It was in the very stones of the city. She visited the Uffizi Gallery and stood before Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. She had seen it in books 100 times, but in person it was transcendent. The delicacy of the colors, the ethereal beauty of the goddesses spoke of a world where beauty was a divine right. Inspired, she signed up for a 3-day watercolor workshop for beginners, held in a sunny studio overlooking the Arno River. The instructor, a patient woman named Julia, taught them to see color in shadows and light in darkness. Linda's first attempts were muddy and hesitant. But on the second day, as she tried to capture the silhouette of the Ponte Vecchio against the late afternoon sky, something clicked. She stopped trying to paint a bridge and started painting the feeling of the bridge, the golden light, the sense of ancient history, the gentle flow of the river beneath it. She was so absorbed she didn't notice the man standing behind her until Julia said, "Molto bene, Linda. You see, you are not copying. You are interpreting." Linda turned and saw a man about her age, with kind eyes and a head of thick silver hair, smiling at her work. He was dressed in clothes that were both elegant and slightly paint-stained. "Una bella atmosfera," he said. "A beautiful atmosphere, Rossi," Linda murmured, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. It was a reaction she hadn't had in 30 years. His name was Alessandro, and he was a local art restorer, a friend of Julia's. He joined their class for the final day, offering gentle, insightful critiques. He had a way of looking at her not as a grandmother or a babysitter, but as an artist, however novice. He saw the person she was trying to become. On the last evening of the workshop, the group went for a farewell drink. Alessandro sought Linda out. "You have a good eye," he said in careful English. "It is a gift to see the world with fresh eyes at any age. Many people, they stop seeing." "Thank you," Linda said. "I think I stopped for a while. I'm trying to start again." He smiled. "Then you are in the right city. Florence is a good place for rebirth." We talked for an hour. About art, about losing spouses. He had lost his wife 5 years prior, about the challenge of building a new life from the ashes of the old. It was the easiest conversation she'd had since arriving in Italy. When he asked if she would like to see his studio the next day, she felt a flutter of nervous excitement. "Yes," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "I would like that very much." Walking back to her hotel that night, the warm Tuscan air wrapping around her like a shawl, Linda felt a new layer of her old self being sloughed away. She was not just a traveler or a grandmother. She was a woman who could blush, a woman who could say yes to an invitation from an interesting man. She was a student, a painter, a person with a future that was hers to paint, stroke by unpredictable stroke. The final month of Linda's journey was not an ending, but a beginning woven into the fabric of her return. She spent a week in Alessandro's Florence, a city that now held the scent of oil paint and the warmth of a shared espresso. Their connection was a quiet, respectful one, built on a mutual understanding of loss and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild. He didn't ask her to stay. She didn't promise to return. They simply existed in a beautiful, present moment. A gift they gave each other. When she finally boarded the plane back to Denver, the woman in the seat was not the same one who had left. Her skin was sun-kissed, her posture straighter. In her carry-on was her sketchbook, filled with wobbly but heartfelt sketches, and her journal, now brimming with her own entries next to Robert's. She had not erased her past. She had simply built a new wing onto it. The reunion at the airport was awash with tears, but not the kind she had feared. Mark's hug was long and tight, a wordless apology and welcome all in one. Chloe's embrace was genuine, her eyes soft with a new respect. The twins barreled into her legs, their chatter a familiar, beloved symphony. But the true test came the following week. "Mom, we're in a bind." Sophia has the flu. Can you possibly take the twins for a few hours after preschool tomorrow? Mark asked, his voice careful, tinged with the old expectation but layered with a new awareness. Linda felt the old pull, the automatic yes forming on her lips. But she looked at the map of Italy on her refrigerator, the pin still in Florence. She took a gentle breath. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I can't tomorrow," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I have a standing appointment at the Botanic Gardens with my sketchbook group, but I'd love to have them all for dinner on Saturday. I'll make my famous spaghetti." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't a rejection. It was a redefinition. "Okay, Mom?" Mark said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Saturday sounds great. Have fun sketching." She hung up the phone, her heart pounding, not with anxiety, but with triumph. The boundary had been set, and it had held. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, had given her family the gift of seeing her as a whole person. Linda's life in Denver resumed. But the geometry was forever changed. Her map now had new coordinates, her sketching group, Italian language classes at the community center, and a quiet corner in her home that was dedicated solely to her watercolors. She was a grandmother, yes, but she was also Linda. She had proven that a heart isn't broken by setting boundaries. It's put back together, stronger and more complete, when you finally have the courage to choose yourself. And her map, she knew, was far from complete. Greece was waiting. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below if Linda's journey to find her voice resonated with you. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories of quiet courage and real-life transformations.